In this video, I try to answer all the questions you might have concerning the world of The Adventures of Superman, starring George Reeves. Besides watching Superman and reading the comics for decades, I've done a lot of research to see how deep I could go into the series I've watched off and on all my life. This series, of course, ran in the 1950s and was one of the first to be filmed in color, despite not originally airing in color until later on after its original run. Sometimes people wonder if George Reeves is related to Christopher Reeve, who played Superman in the 70s and 80s. Their names are slightly different. George's last name ends with an S, and that was not his real birth name. He was born George Kiefer Brewer in Woolstock, Iowa. Still, it's pretty coincidental that the two biggest early Supermen had almost the same last name. Now, George Reeves was the first actor to play Superman on television, but he wasn't the first man to play Superman in a live-action version. Now, Kirk Alyn was actually the first one to wear the cape on screen on the Superman movie serials of the 1940s, and then there was the Fletcher cartoons, of course, that came out in theaters in the 40s as well. The Adventures of Superman was sponsored by Kellogg's breakfast cereal.
Tony, tell the folks how Frosted Flakes taste.
Great!
One thing you never saw in those cereal commercials was Lois Lane. She didn't show up with Clark, Perry, Wyatt, and Jimmy for the breakfast commercials because Kellogg's did not know how to explain how Lois could be at Clark's house eating breakfast without insinuating something that 1950s TV audiences would not accept, especially 1950s parents. What were the names of Clark Kent's adoptive parents on The Adventures of Superman?
What is it?
If you said Jonathan and Martha Kent, you would be wrong.
Merciful heavens!
Clark Kent's Earth parents were named Jonathan and Martha eventually in the comics and other movies and series, but Kent's parents on this show were Eben and Sarah Kent. Those are the names of the Kents in The Adventures of Superman novel from 1942 and the first Superman serial. Superman's adoptive parents would be known as Martha and Jonathan Kent in the comics about the same time as the TV series started, and those names stuck ever since. The slogan, Truth, Justice, and the American Way, used on the show's intro, was first heard on Superman radio programs before the comic books used it during World War II.
Fights a never-ending battle for truth, justice, and the American way.
The pilot for Superman was a movie entitled Superman and the Mole Men, released to theaters in 1951. It became a two-part episode for the series later on.
Jor-el, Krypton's leading man of science, has been summoned to address a special meeting of the Governing Council.
Did you know the costumes worn in the Planet Krypton scenes were put together from ones used in 1940s serials, like the one Buster Crabbe wore in the serial Flash Gordon Conquers the Universe in 1940? Kryptonians also wore parts of the costumes of Captain Marvel from Adventures of Captain Marvel 1941 and Captain America from 1944, among others. Cables and wires were used for Superman's takeoffs early in filming. During filming of the Superman and the Mole Men feature, the wire supporting Reeves snapped and he fell to the studio floor. Now, in the Mind Machine episode, I actually think this next scene is really cool for its day especially. When Superman takes off to fly after the bus, there's a quick cut to Superman leaving the ground on wires, and it's obviously a stunt double if you slow it down especially. And if you look closely, you can see the wires. Now, I really think they were onto something though here. I mean, it's neat how they made the dust kick up as he takes off. The Christopher Reeve movies would later perfect the art of using wires to make Superman fly. But at this point, the previous Superman, Kirk Alyn, had even resorted to using a cartoon for flying scenes. Now, later on, they relied mainly on Reeves leaping on springboards to simulate him taking off in flight. You can see in the episode The Evil 3, the springboard is actually visible when Reeves leaps off into the air. Techniques for landing involve Reeves jumping off a ladder or holding an off-camera horizontal bar and swinging down in the frame. Eventually, they came up with a cool wireless solution where Reeves could lay on sort of a pan with a pole sticking out that could be manipulated by men out of the frame to move Reeves around as he was supposed to be flying. George Reeves was 44 years old during the filming of the sixth and final season of The Adventures of Superman, making him the oldest actor to ever play Clark Kent and Superman in live action. He would have done another season too, had he not met with an untimely death. Here's a question. How many supervillains appeared on The Adventures of Superman from the comic books? Give up? The answer is 0 supervillains from the comic books appeared in The Adventures of Superman, not even Lex Luthor. Jimmy Olsen actor Jack Larson, Lois Lane's Noel, Neill, and Phyllis Coates would appear in other Superman productions many times over the years, like the Superboy TV series of the 80s, and Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman in the 90s, and even the motion picture Superman Returns. The tone of the show went from dark and gritty to lighthearted and kid-friendly when color was introduced in 1954.
Great Caesar's goat!
When it was filmed in color, color TVs were pretty rare. Less than 1% of households had a color TV set by the end of 1954. George Reeves did appear in prime time in the Superman costume for a famous episode of I Love Lucy, where Lucy tells everyone that Superman will be at little Ricky's birthday party. And when she fails to get him, she dresses up like Superman and gets stuck outside on the ledge. But lucky for her, Superman, George Reeves, comes out to rescue her.
How do you do? My name is Superman.
Lucy, what are you doing out there? I resist it.
Cargo, you mean to say that you've been married to her for 15 years?
Yeah, 15 years.
And they call me Superman.
And that's not the only connection between Superman and I Love Lucy. Dean King and Terry Hatcher did a special tribute to I Love Lucy on the Lois and Clark TV series with a dream sequence where Superman is Ricky Ricardo.
Lois, I think you got some splaining to do.
Uh-oh. Wee.
Ay, caramba! You spotted them!
More seasons of Superman were planned when George Reeves was shot in June 1959. Reeves was only 45. His death is still controversial to this day, having been ruled a suicide even though many suspect it was murder. In 2006, future Batman star Ben Affleck would play in Hollywoodland, a movie that depicted the story of Reeves and a fictionalized account of the investigation into his death. Can you guess what Superman, The Andy Griffith Show, Batman, and Star Trek all have in common? In the Adventures of Superman episode, The Deserted Village, about a minute into the start of the show, a man in a radioactive suit walks in front of what would be in a few years to come the Andy Griffith Show courthouse in Mayberry. It's the building with the large pillars, and right next to it is Floyd's barbershop. Coincidentally, the actress Maudie Prickett, who plays Matilda on this episode, played on 5 episodes of Mayberry RFD and 5 episodes of The Andy Griffith Show. And another actor from this episode who played Dr. Oscar Jessup was Mayberry's dry cleaner for a couple of episodes. Kind of weird, huh?
You've just crossed over into the Twilight Zone.
Look.
In this scene from The Deserted Village, you can see the church that Andy Taylor and Barney Fife attended. It was called the All Souls Church and was also known as Community Church. This next scene from the Superman episode, The Monkey Mystery, has Lois Lane and Clark Kent in Metropolis. Watch Lois walk on over in front of the Mayberry courthouse. Andy didn't come out to greet her, though, because, he wasn't there yet.
You, looking for me?
Now this time on the episode The Secret of Superman, Lois drives through Mayberry right up past the courthouse and stops about where Floyd's barbershop is, which is the same spot that Captain Kirk walked by with Joan Collins on the Star Trek episode City on the Edge of Forever. In this scene from the Superman episode Treasure of the Incas, Clark Kent is running from Andy's courthouse into Superman Alley where he changes to Superman and he did his takeoff. Superman's alley in Metropolis was also part of Mayberry. In this still from the Andy Griffith Show, you can see the alley between the big 4-story building known as the Mayberry Motel and the theater. Here's the same view from when it appeared on Star Trek. 4 episodes of Star Trek were also filmed in the Andy Griffith set area in the 60s. Now on the Star Trek episode Mary, they turned Mayberry into a post-apocalyptic town. How did they change the city from this broken down shambles back to Mayberry, clean and livable right in time for shooting for the Andy Griffith Show? Holy rat race. Batman and Robin chase Falseface, that's the bad guy, past Gomer's Marine Base right into Mayberry. It's amazing that they made us believe on the Gomer Pyle show that this was an entire Marine base. Unfortunately, the Mayberry Metropolis set, which would have been an amazing piece of history today, was torn down in 1976. The 40-acre sets now house an industrial park and television studios. There's one more link from Superman the Mayberry that I can think of, and that's the 5th season episode, The Town That Wasn't, that features Dick Elliott before he became the mayor of Mayberry on the Andy Griffith Show. If you'd like to see more about that episode, check out my Adventures of Superman 5th season Goofs video. Speaking of locations, did you know the dome building that is shown as Jor-el's home in the very first episode is in reality the Griffith Observatory in the Hollywood Hills? Can you guess which episode was the first to be filmed in color from the Adventures of Superman? The 1955 episode Through the Time Barrier, which is one of my favorite episodes, by the way.
Please don't ask me why. I can't explain.
Nothing will ever hurt it, Clark. Not acid, nor fire, nor nothing else.
Now, Clark's adopted earthly mother tells him that the costume she made him was created from the Kryptonian blanket he arrived to Earth with, and that it's indestructible. She says nothing on Earth can destroy it, but then how was she able to sew and cut it into the shape of his costume? In the episode The Stolen Costume, the crooks try to burn and then cut it with scissors, and they fail at both, proving Superman's costume cannot be altered, sewn, or cut.
You can't cut it neither.
Perhaps the answer lies in the comic books, where a young Clark Kent helped his mother sew the costume using his heat vision to cut the threads. How did the Daily Planet staff not recognize Clark Kent was Superman, even at those times when he wasn't wearing his glasses?
What did you call me? Mr. Kent? Who?
What's the matter? Don't any of you know me?
Now, in this scene from 5 Minutes to Doom, Clark rips off his glasses before jumping out of the car. After a bomb explodes, he and Lois are standing face to face, yet she doesn't recognize him as Superman. Now, this happened again in the episode Panic in the Sky. Now, after attempting to destroy an asteroid, Superman returns to Earth without his memory. When Perry White, Lois Lane, and Jimmy Olsen see Clark Kent at his apartment, they don't recognize him as Superman, even though he doesn't have his glasses on.
Wake up. You're a reporter. You work for me. Now, come on, stop this.
Am I? Are you sure? Who is Superman?
Now, this could be a pretty big goof. I mean, you got 3 investigators that can't recognize that Clark and Superman are the same guy, even though they've seen him many times as Superman, and they work with him on a daily basis in his Clark Kent disguise. There is an explanation that we have from the comics, but that was years later in the late 70s. Superman issue 330, it explained that Superman uses super hypnotism to unconsciously make others see Clark as weak and unhealthy looking, completely different looking than Superman. This would actually make everything make sense.
I don't know. I'm pretty confused.
So am I, Lois. So am I.
Keeping that in mind, there is at least one episode I remember in Season 6, Episode 2, The Magic Secret. Superman hypnotizes and actually levitates Lois Lane. But strangely enough, Perry White had also been able to do this super trick on Lois. To the 1950s generation and beyond, George Reeves will always be the definitive Superman. Please comment and share your memories of George Reeves or watching Superman on TV, movies, or reading the old comic books. Please subscribe, hit the bell for future notifications of videos. Please don't forget to check out my new book, Liberty Ace. And thanks, and have a great day.
Don't miss the next thrill-packed episode in the amazing adventures of Superman.